Hi guys, and welcome to our composition basics stream. So I am Chris, and in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, I am setting up this series of Twitch and YouTube live streams for people to just come along and have a listen, have a bit of a discussion, and communicate with people everywhere, really. So please do let me know in the comments, in the chat, what you would actually like to discuss today, because obviously I am here for you guys. So just going to start with a little introduction about me. As I've said, I'm Chris, in case you didn't notice, and I studied at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. Studied for my music degree, and I am a flute player. Again, the logo up there gives it away. But I studied flute performance, bachelor's degree in Birmingham, which was really awesome. And I wrote some music whilst I was there, and obviously composition is what we are here for. So please do pop something down in the chat if you have any questions for me, if you have anything you'd like to know either about me or about composition, or about how I'm surviving this period of isolation, and if there's anything I can do to help you guys. So please do pop that in the comments, in the chat. So I graduated in 2016, and I have sort of since then been working as a freelance musician. The YouTube channel has only just started to regrow. I took some time away from creating content for that, so there is a lot more coming in the future. And on top of the YouTube channel, obviously, I'm quite active on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. And hopefully now Twitch and YouTube live streams will also become something that's a little bit more frequent, especially if people actually enjoy what I produce. So my composition method is something that I would like to start with. So during my degree, I actually created a CD of music with a friend of mine, Ben, who was actually a composition with technology student. So he was sort of half composition and half music technology. He was my sound engineer, and he also wrote some of the music. And in that CD, I also wrote some of the music. So I happen to have a copy of it here. So this is my wonderful CD. It's called Luci d'Inverno, which basically means lights of winter. So as you can tell, the compositions themselves are actually to do with winter, to do with snow, to do with all the things that are sort of related in some tenuous way to winter. And a lot of people have asked how I personally come up with the ideas for compositions. My students, if I do a little bit of noodling in a lesson, if I'm teaching flute, they go, "How do you do that? How do you come up with those ways of just playing stuff, playing notes?" So generally speaking, if I'm either in an improvisatory mood or I'm actually working towards creating a composition, I will start with either one, a chord sequence, or two, a melody, or some kind of noodle. And I work from that. So I pick one of those aspects and work from it. I used to, as a younger musician, I used to spend a lot of time trying to write complete orchestral masterpieces in one go. I used to love to either use some manuscript paper and a pen or pencil, or Sibelius, which is a score writing piece of score writing software. And I used to think, yeah, I'll just write a full symphony orchestra piece. It will be 20 minutes long, and it will have 100 orchestral instruments and a full choir, and it'd be great. Obviously, that didn't happen. So in my youth, I was quite happy to produce, to try to produce large, full-scale sort of orchestral works. And then I suddenly thought, oh, I don't like this idea. Or, oh, I don't want the instrumentation to be like this. I don't want this specific aspect of the music to stay as it is. And rather than maybe scaling back and taking my time, choosing a different instrument, maybe just writing something on the piano and then orchestrating it, I would just say, no, this is rubbish, and delete it. And that's pretty much what happened for the first few years of my composition journey. I used to just stop. I used to think, no, I don't like that idea, and delete it. So my method now has changed over the years to incorporate a lot of different ideas. There are a lot of different composers I listen to, and a lot of different composers I take some form of inspiration from. And I now start, as I said, with that chord sequence, melody or fragment of a melody, a motif of some kind, and build my ideas from there. So a lot of the way that composers will learn to write in their own style is to learn from someone else's style and then to break the mold. So the best example of learning composition is Bach. Bach is phenomenally good at creating really functional, as we listen to it now, really functional harmony. So the chords just work. The way he moves from one chord to another just works. And so as musicians, we tend to look to Bach, the great J.S. Bach, the grandfather, really, of music, of our modern classical music. We take Bach and we say, right, how do I learn to compose like Bach in order to not compose like Bach? And it sounds like a strange concept, but what we do is almost like creating a new tactic. If you're playing rugby and you're facing a side that is vastly more physically dominant than you, but perhaps has a weakness in terms of speed and ball carrying, then you say, okay, well, there's no point in us opting for scrums. There's no point in us opting for rucks and mauls and going in at the breakdown and trying to overpower our opponent. The best way is to run circles around them. And this concept is similar for music. We say, okay, how does Bach do it? Bach does it like this. Therefore, we learn those rules. We learn how to compose like Bach. And then we say, okay, I want to be myself now, and we hang the rules. We get rid of them. But rather than just going in blindly and not understanding the rules, you have to learn them first. So we learn chord sequences. So an easy chord sequence is something like chord 1, followed by chord 4, followed by chord 5, and followed by chord 1 again. Now what this does is, number 1 we call the tonic, and the tonic is the main chord in your key. So let's take C major. You have C major, your first chord is C. Easy peasy. And then because our notes go up in step like the alphabet does, so we go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and back to C. So we go, okay, so chord 4, C, D, E, F. So we go from chord C, which is chord 1, to chord 4, which is chord F, and then we move to 5, which is G, and we call that the dominant. and that's the most important chord other than chord 1. And then once we hit that, we think, okay, where does chord 5 want to go? Generally speaking, chord 5 wants to go back to chord 1. So 1, 4, 5, 1, and you've got yourself a chord sequence. Sorry, I've got a bit of a bad throat today. It's not coronavirus. We're okay, or at least as far as I know. So you've now got 4 chords, or you've got 3 chords with 1 repeated chord. And you think, well, how do I make that more interesting? So you start with that basic chord sequence, and then you think either we decide to substitute different chords in place of those chords, or we add notes to those chords. So we can add chords that are called secondary dominants. So they are acting as a dominant chord, as chord 5 or G in the key of C. And then we can use those to fulfill the same job that the dominant chord does, which is chord 5, but just slightly differently. It sounds different, it creates a different feeling. Or we add notes, and rather than just using perhaps a plain chord 5, we add what we call the leading note, and that's a 7th on the dominant chord. And then we add that, and we go, okay, so what is a 7th above that note? So we start with G. Chords, by the way, are made up of note 1, note 3, and note 5, generally speaking. So we'd have a G, and then we go up to A to B, and then from B to C to D, which is 1, 3, and 5. Then from there, we go, okay, well, how do we add 7? So G to B to D, E, F. We add F. So we have a G, a B, a D, and an F. And that gives you your dominant chord. And that really signifies the turn back to 1. So once I've come up with that basic chord sequence, I might think, okay, well, I want to use those chords, and then I want to repeat the same chord sequence and maybe change something. Either substitute one of those other chords in, or add notes to those chords. Once that's done, we can think, okay, well, let's just keep adding chords because the basics are there. We can just use it on a piano. That's nice and easy. We don't even have to be good at piano. I hold my hands up and say I'm absolutely terrible at the piano, so we don't worry about that. Now, once we've got the piano sorted and we can just literally play chord, 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 we think, great, fine, I've got a piece. And that's how we come up with 4 chord songs, because it's really easy, it's really simple, it's easy to latch onto. Our brains find it quite easy to latch onto those 4 chords. They are functional, so they work one after another. And then we can just add a nice guitar riff, or we can add a cool drum beat, and then a melody on top for the voice, and we're done. Easy peasy. Lyrics are something different, and I'm not very good at lyrics, so I won't touch on them. They can go away. So then, once I've come up with that chord sequence, for example, I will then sketch out those ideas. So as I mentioned, it could be on the keyboard or on the piano, or it could be on software like Sibelius, or on a piece of manuscript paper, old-fashioned pencil and paper. Now, a lot of people say, but how can you hear what the chords are doing? That comes from musical experience. So I will put chord 1 down, and even if I don't have perfect pitch and I can't hear that it's a C, an E, and a G, making up a C chord, what I can hear is that that's acting as 1. I can hear a major chord in my head, and I can think, okay, so if chord 1 sounds like this, chord 5 sounds like this in my head, and I know the theory behind it and how those chords interact with each other. Obviously, Sibelius and other score writing tools are absolutely fantastic because they do that for you. You can hit the playback button and you just go, does that sound good? Yes, that sounds good. So we put those chords in, and then once we've sketched out those ideas, we can maybe start to change the rhythms. We can maybe start to change the instruments that are playing them. We could maybe add 1 or 2 instruments, not too much to start with, because orchestration is something that comes quite a lot later. We come up with those ideas with 1 or 2 instruments. We come up with the entire piece basically in a sketch form, and then once we've come up with that sketch, we then orchestrate. Now, orchestration is the art of giving instruments stuff to play. In a nutshell, if we didn't have orchestration, everything would be played on the same instruments. For example, if we wrote something on the piano and then we didn't orchestrate it further, it would just stay on the piano. We'd say, okay, fine. That's great. Sounds good on the piano. I think most of things sound good on the piano, so that's fine. But generally speaking, we want to have a variety of music. So orchestration plays a pivotal role in moving from the basics of a piano out to maybe a string quartet, 2 violins, a viola and a cello. Maybe to a slightly larger ensemble like a brass octet or a dectet, with trumpets and horns and trombones and tubas and things. And then you might think, yeah, but I don't want just one family of music. So you say, musical instruments. So you say, right, okay, well, what about chamber orchestra? Then you could have maybe single winds like a flute, a clarinet, a bassoon and an oboe. You could have maybe 1 or 2 French horns, maybe 1 or 2 trumpets, and then a string section with violins, violas and cellos, possibly even some basses. Then maybe a little bit of percussion at the back, and then you've got sort of like a classical orchestra, an early sort of late 17, early 1800s orchestra, sort of Mozart era, nothing too big, nothing too fancy, but really, really sublimely simple. Then you think, okay, I want it to be even bigger, and that's where we get the Romantic and the 20th century kind of orchestras coming in, and you get a huge range of players, huge range of instruments across a wide genre of musical styles across the globe, basically. So orchestration is my sort of composition method number 3. So let's recap. We start with a chord sequence or a melody or a bit of a noodle. Once we've had a bit of a noodle, we've created a chord sequence, etc. We sketch those ideas onto a keyboard or onto processing software like Sibelius, and we play it back and we go, yes, I like the chords, maybe I enjoy the chords, but I'd like to change up how they sound the second time around. So we play one chord sequence of 4 chords, we move on and we go, it's a bit boring now, I've heard these chords before. Then we use the secondary dominants, we use the chords that act like chord 5 but aren't chord 5, and we change them, or we add lots of notes. So adding the 7th, like I mentioned before, so that's the 7th above the note that the chord starts on. So G goes all the way up to F, because we go G, A, B, C, D, E, F. Number 8 would be back to G. So we add the 7th on, and that adds colour to the chord, adds a different tonal quality, a different sound. Then once we've sort of sketched out those ideas and we've maybe got a few bars, we've maybe got even like up to 30 seconds worth of music, we then go, right, let's continue this sketch. Obviously it takes loads of time. We move those sketches out and out and out and out, and my camera doesn't show this, but I'm like this, and the piece ends up being really long. It could be really long for you, could be a minute. Really long could be a full symphony like Gustav Mahler with like an hour-long symphony with a full chorus, blah, blah, blah. Great. But then once we've got this, maybe it's all just on the piano, we then think, how do we want it to sound in terms of the colour and the timbre of the instruments that are being played? We think, well, I don't want it just to be a piano. So we go from just being piano to adding, say, a wind quintet, or a brass octet, or a string orchestra, or a full symphony orchestra, and we build up those layers of orchestration as we go. We don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to suddenly go, here's 30 instruments, let's, move this piano part into those instruments. You might think, okay, so I have a couple of ideas of how I want the strings to play, what I want them to do, the techniques I want them to use, how I want them to, the dynamics, the sound, how loud it is, how quiet it is, things like that. And then without obviously writing those into the score straight away, you just think, okay, well, I'd like it to be maybe a thin sound and not too low and not too high. So maybe a middle register in the violin and maybe the viola, so it's not too high and not too low. And then you think, oh, I want to add some little sort of stab chords with some brass to sort of interject and get in the way. And then I'd like some trills to happen on the flute, and you come up with these ideas, and you start to sketch out and you start to orchestrate what you've written into other parts. Now, it's now about 20 minutes in, and I would like now to discuss how I learnt to compose specifically. How I went from being someone who's never composed anything in their life to someone who's now composed half of the tracks on this CD. And how that actually worked, how easy it was for me. So, if anyone does have a question, pop it in the chat, and I will get to that when I can. I would quite like to see what you think. So I would quite like to... I'm actually just double checking here. My YouTube stream has decided not to work. So that's great. Well done. Thanks, YouTube. There we go. So it looks like Twitch is the only one working currently. I'm trying to use Restream, and it doesn't seem to want to let me do it, which is very, very annoying. Bear with me just for a couple of minutes, and anyone in the Twitch chat, do let me know if you do have any questions, and I will get to you when I can. I'm just going to try and get this YouTube stream up and running. I'm just going to try and get this. Oh no! Apparently it is working. That's my fault. It is working. I'm just a noob. Obviously, that's just me. Well, there we go. So YouTube is apparently working. I will intermittently keep checking to make sure that it's actually going. Just so. Yes, we're all good. We're all good. Okay. Apologies there. So. Now, my development as a composer, I spent a lot of time experimenting. Now, what I mean by experimenting is literally just playing anything and everything, playing in loads of different genres. I used to play in a folk band. I used to sing to my friends' bemusement sometimes. I was terrible at remembering lyrics. If any of my friends do end up coming into the stream, they will confirm this, that I was absolutely terrible at lyrics, completely and utterly useless. Singing was pretty good, you know, I could sing. I was a fairly decent frontman, I could get the crowd going, but I was absolutely terrible with lyrics. So, play things, sing things, play in orchestras, play solo music, play with small ensembles, play different styles of music, like I said, folk, rock, classical, anything you want to play, because it really widens the amount of music your brain understands. So experimentation on every level. That also means experimentation with composition. So I started off by finding a free template of musical staves to print. I just printed like 500 pages of musical staves, and I just scribbled all over them. I just practiced my my Bach chorales, which is how you learn the theory behind Bach's compositional processes, how it works, why it works. And we go from sort of just practicing how to do a treble clef and how to write 4/4 and how to do the key signatures, to actually being able to write maybe a line of music. Maybe it doesn't make any musical sense. It doesn't make any sense. You play it and you think, that's really weird. I didn't write that. I did write that, obviously. And you think, okay, well, let's go now to a different line. Let's rub it out, scribble it, throw it in the bin, whatever. And let's just go again to another experiment, and let's just try to figure out exactly what it is my musical language is going to be, what my musical style is going to be. And so this is where listening to different genres, really understanding different types of music, and then picking what you feel you sound like. You know, you listen to film music, you can tell when it's John Williams, you can tell when it's Howard Shore, when it's Hans Zimmer. You're like, yeah, I know these people. I know because I've listened to so many film soundtracks. I've watched so many films. I can go, that's scored by this guy. That's scored by this guy. When you listen to classical music, you can say, well, this sounds like Beethoven. Oh yeah, it's Beethoven. This is Mozart. It's clearly Mozart. Yeah, it's Mozart. This is Bach. This is Tchaikovsky. This is Rachmaninoff. Whoever. And you listen to so much music that you begin to understand how the composer thinks. You understand the sound worlds that they create. So experimentation and listening, two of the most amazing things to grow your compositions. Now, another way I grew as a composer is purely by speaking to people who perform on the instruments that you're writing for. Because guaranteed, a composer who hasn't spoken to someone who, say, plays the flute, in my case, comes up to me and says, Chris, I would really like you to perform my brand new, exciting new solo flute piece with electronics and electric violin, harp and bass drum. And you think, that sounds really cool. Yeah, why not? Let's do it. And he gives you this flute part, and suddenly you're trying to play a melodic line whilst playing a trill and doing circular breathing on top of pulling the head joint out at the same time. You're thinking that's fundamentally impossible. There's no way a flute player of any standard, whether you're professional like myself, whether you're even more professional like the professional orchestral players, James Galway, Emmanuel Pahou, Jasmine Choi, all these amazing players, or whether you're a student and maybe you've been learning the flute for a month. It doesn't matter how good you are, how much of a beginner you are, how much of a professional you are. Some of these things are just completely impossible. So the best thing to do is to actually speak to and provide a score for the people that you're writing for. So if someone's come up to me and say, Chris, I would like to write a flute piece, and I would like you to perform the premiere in 6 months' time. I've written some sketches, I've experimented, I've listened to lots of flute music, and here is what my style sounds like on the flute. And I say, yep, sounds great. Where's the score? They show me the score. If they show me the score 6 months ahead of time, and it's a relatively difficult piece but not too difficult, a couple of months practice will be fine. Easy peasy. If it's fundamentally impossible, those 6 months are completely paramount, because we need to be able to talk with the composer, talk with the performer, and say, yeah, this isn't going to work. Some things might be absolutely amazing, they might sound brilliant when played by two flute players, because you might be thinking, well, actually, if one does a trill and also sings whilst playing, because that's something you can do on a flute, and the other guy does a scale or a melodic passage whilst using a special type of head joint that allows you to slide it in and out of the flute body and therefore change the pitch. That's great. You can't do all of those things at once, but with two flute players, that would be absolutely amazing. Or if you had a backing track, perhaps, where you record something, or you have a loop pedal and you play into the microphone, you play one thing, you set it on loop, and then you play something over the top. Fine. But as a single flute player with no electronics and no other ensemble performers, it's not going to work. So speak to the people who you're writing for, whether it's a flute player, whether it's an oboe player, a guitarist, a kazoo player. It doesn't matter. You have to understand what the instruments are capable of, and also what the performers are capable of. Some people might be really into modern 21st century, really progressive kind of music. Some people might be specialists in early 20th century French conservatory music. Great. Some might be Baroque specialists, fundamentally sort of the early 1700s, J.S. Bach, Telemann, people like that, Vivaldi. And you might be thinking, well, I would like this Baroque flute player, they sound really great, but my piece is fundamentally not anything to do with Baroque. They may not be able to do it, not because they're not a good player, but purely because the techniques you're asking them to employ either don't work on their instrument or they just don't understand them. So talk to those players of the instruments. Really, 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 really paramount. The next thing is actually speaking to already established composers. Now, that doesn't mean to say you have to sort of write an email to John Williams and say, so, how did you do with writing the music to Star Wars? He's probably not going to get back to you. I'm not speaking from experience. I haven't tried to contact him. I'm sure he would contact me back. Sure. But established composers, maybe people you know. Like my friend Ben, who wrote the music with me for my CD, which is over there, that side. He is a fantastic composer, has his own style, a very chilled, very relaxed kind of style, folk vibes, film music vibes, and a little bit of orchestral vibes as well. Combine them in this melting pot, and if you listen to more than 2 or 3 pieces of his music, you understand his musical language, you understand his style, and you think, that's Ben. I get that, that's Ben. So I'm now just going to quickly check to see if there is anyone in the chat. No one is saying anything. That's very sad. Very, very sad. Never mind. So now, once you've tried to establish some sort of connection with a composer, speak to them about their process as well. Their process isn't like mine. It's not necessarily going to work in the same way as mine. And it's one of those things that's very personal. And my approach isn't perfect. My approach isn't the only definitive approach. But it works for me. And I'm not a full-time composer, so I can probably dedicate a bit more time to just experimenting. I can write 1 piece a year, and it doesn't matter because no one is expecting it. No one is paying me to write music. I write it for my own pleasure, and then I perform it, and suddenly people go, oh, that's cool music. And the final point, I touched on this with Bach, is music theory. Learn how to break the rules. If you learn the rules first, you understand them. You know, you listen to Bach, you listen to Mozart, you listen to Brahms, you listen to Beethoven, you listen to all of these fantastic composers. They built upon what came before. And this is not because they just went, to hell with whatever this person wrote, and let's write something different. They said, okay, well, I've learned, I've understood, I've studied, and now I've said it's not how I want to write. I've moved on, and I would like to do my own style, but I want to stay within the realms of conformity, you know, because it works. It's not necessarily that you're copying other people, you know, just because you use the same chord sequence as someone doesn't mean that you have copied their work. It's purely the fact that what they have done just works. So those chord sequences, those melodies, things like that, they just work. So you say, well, if that chord followed by that chord followed by that chord actually works continuously, why not use it? I would challenge you to find any piece within maybe a 300-year span between sort of 1650 on this end of the spectrum all the way up to maybe 1950 that doesn't have some form of chord sequence or melodic idea that's not related to anything else in the last 300 years. It's pretty much impossible. There are so many styles that facilitate different approaches, but that doesn't mean to say that we just throw the rulebook out. We learn the rulebook, we digest the rulebook, and we say, yes, I understand it, and then we sort of take pages out and go, well, I don't want that page, I don't want this page, but what I do want is this, and I do want this, and you add things in. It's where then we spoke about 7th chords, dominant chords before. This is when things like 9th, 13th, lots of other scales come in because they just stack scales on top of each other, stack chords on top of each other to add interest and colour, where those chords wouldn't be used in the same context in a piece of Bach, but completely differently in a piece of Schubert or Schumann, something like that, something a bit more romantic, late classical, early romantic. And then again, those chords will be used similarly in 20th century, 21st century music perhaps, but again, in a completely different context. They will sound different. They might not even be used to perform the same function as they were 300 years ago, but they will still be there. So there you go. Learn the rules to break the rules. Most important thing. Now, let's... Chat's very, 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 very quiet. Even though I only have one person. I'm just going to say sorry to the one person who has stayed in the chat the whole time. So, I will pop something in the chat, guys. And then hopefully maybe someone will answer. Let's hope. Okay, so now we shall move on to another discussion about, this time we're going to discuss my favorite composers / compositions and sort of a couple of reasons why they might be my favorite. So some of my favorite composers include people like Mozart. Now, if any of you know me, people understand my musical ideas stem from classical music. I'm very much a classical musician. I have a lot of respect for and a lot of experience with sort of modern music, pop music, folk music, loads of different types of classical music, all combined. I like world music. I love Chinese music. So that's another really cool idea is other music from across the world. To put that in, world music is really exciting. So, and it will give it sort of another bit of flair that other people might not have. So that's another thing. But Mozart is pretty much, he pretty much has been and probably will always be my number one composer, my favourite composer, especially for his opera. Now you're going to look at me and go, Chris, you don't really look like an opera person. I'm totally an opera person. I'm a flute player, but I'm also a classical singer as my second, less professional thing. I just dabble in it, and I'm okay. I'm a decent singer, but I'm by no means Pavarotti. But Mozart, his operas are just absolutely phenomenal. Not just because of the music and the orchestration, and of course the amount he wrote in such a short space of time. He died very young. But purely because he delivers so many characters. So much character within a couple of hours. So you could be looking at a comedy. It's almost like reading Shakespeare. You might not be the most Shakespearean kind of person. You might not enjoy it that much. I'm not the biggest Shakespeare fan, in all honesty. There are some I do enjoy and some I don't. But Mozart is like Shakespeare in the fact that he is able to introduce musical comic relief as much as Shakespeare is in his tragedies, and vice versa. He's able to create such polar emotions in a really small, compact space of time. He's also fantastic for bringing characters to life through the music he does. Think the Queen of the Night aria is probably one of the most famous arias in the world from the Magic Flute. Again, of course, I love the Magic Flute because it's got flute in the title. And I have played the Magic Flute a couple of times. And it's fantastic. It's an absolutely brilliant opera. I recommend you go and find a recorded version of it, either sound or video. I'm just going to take a quick drink again because my throat's nice and dry. There we go. I'm talking too much. Almost weird, isn't it, on stream to talk too much? Okay, so Mozart, Magic Flute, the aria, the Queen of the Night aria, is full of character. She is big and boisterous. She is one of the main characters in... she is the mother of one of the other characters, and she is absolutely insane. Go and have a listen to the Queen of the Night aria. It's phenomenal. But it just has so much character that you can hear her slightly tender side as a mother, but you can also hear her, I am the queen of the night, look at me, I'm big and boisterous and loud. And it has some of the highest notes for a soprano in opera, full stop. So that, again, testament to the people who were singing at Mozart's time to be able to hit those notes that I wouldn't even attempt if I was a woman. So there we go. Another composer slightly later now is Beethoven. Now, a lot of people say, oh yeah, but Beethoven's just overrated, he's overplayed. Yeah, he is. He definitely is. But there's a reason for it. It's almost... So the symphony, or the piece of music that I'm gonna tell you about is Symphony Number 5. The one that goes ba 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 ba. Now that, everyone knows that. That is the Fate motif. That's like knocking on the door. That's like knock, 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 knock. Knock, 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 knock. And that's Fate knocking on Beethoven's door, basically. Beethoven's always looking over his shoulder, thinking, oh, hello, Fate's coming to get me. But the way he writes that motif and how it recurs through the whole symphony is just absolutely fantastic. It's just such a feat of musical endurance for him to be able to interweave it. The whole of the first movement, just give it a listen. Give it a listen. Next piece is Rimsky-Korsakov. Now, he's a Russian composer, and the piece I most love from Rimsky-Korsakov is Scheherazade. Now, Scheherazade is about a princess and a pirate and stuff. It's almost like Sinbad the Sailor kind of stuff. If you even know what Sinbad the Sailor, that's probably showing my age a bit there. But it's made up of where my idea of composing with a little bit of experimentation, a bit of noodling, this is where Rimsky-Korsakov's influence comes into my compositional process. Because Rimsky-Korsakov in Scheherazade actually relates that sort of very folky sort of, let's come up with a violin tune, as if we were just playing it, just sat on a beach somewhere with your violin in 1902, just sat there on a beach and you're just playing this very, very light, very folky, very experimental melody. It's a noodle. It's just a complete noodle. And the whole movement is based on this noodle. It comes back in lots of different instruments. This is where the orchestration part comes in. Again, another fundamental part. And Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov is one of the best pieces, in my opinion, to see how sort of an idea translates into the rest of the piece of music. So another composer of a similar era, the Romantic period, is Mendelssohn. Now, Mendelssohn wrote songs, Mendelssohn wrote choral pieces, Mendelssohn wrote symphonic pieces, and Mendelssohn wrote chamber works, and he wrote concerti. Now, his violin concerto in E minor is hands down one of the top pieces in the world ever written, period. It's one of those pieces that I adore. I absolutely adore it, and it's probably the one piece in the world that makes me sad that I don't play the violin. I wanted to play the violin when I was younger, and my mum told me not to because I would sound like a steaming pile of rubbish for a very, 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 very long time. Whereas with the flute you can kind of get by and not sound too bad. So we went for flute in the end. But we started off wanting to play the violin, and years and years later I thought, yeah, I'm happy with the flute. And then probably in my teens I heard Mendelssohn's violin concerto in E minor for the first time, and I was like, what? This is insane. Absolutely amazing piece, gorgeous piece. So Mendelssohn violin concerto in E minor, literally hands down one of the best pieces. If you listen to Classic FM over Easter and you do their Hall of Fame, that's one of the pieces that will be in my like top 3. Probably that, probably the Rimsky-Korsakov, and either something by Mozart, because I like to get Mozart in there somehow, or a flute piece, because I'm a flute player and I have to be a bit biased towards flute pieces. So, final composer that I just absolutely adore is Poulenc. Now, not many people know Poulenc. He was part of a movement called Les Six, which were 6 French composers in the early to mid 20th century. And Poulenc has a penchant for chamber music and especially wind sonatas, oboe, clarinet, bassoon, and flute. He wrote them all with very similar melodic motifs, similar ideas, very, very similar harmonic language as well. And the Poulenc flute sonata is one of the go-to flute sonatas. When you say you're a flute player, people go da-da-da-da-da, which is the first little motif, the opening motif from the opening movement of the flute sonata. And I had a friend at university. One of the first things he did when he found out that I was a flute player, that he was living in the same halls as a flute player, was pop his head out the door and go do-do-do-do-do, because that was him, and that's what people do when they know you're a flute player and they listen to classical music. They know that Poulenc is going to be in your arsenal of pieces to play. So that's a few of the composers that I really enjoy, I really admire, and some of the works. So go and have a listen to those works if you remember what they're called. Okay, so now my compositions are a little bit different to all of the composers I mentioned above. I will just pop this on camera again. So this is Luci d'inverno. Now, it means the lights of winter, so if you were here earlier, you will know. If not, that's what it is. And my friend Ning Ning, who did the artwork for this, is also a violinist, so she understands music very well. A lot of folk music, fantastic at folk. And she drew this, and if we open the CD cover out, if I can see, there we go, the tree goes all the way around from the front to the back, and then on the inside we have this here. So it's basically all things related to winter. So if you see this, camera's back to front, if we look at this little guy up here, he is a waxwing, and they are birds that only come to the UK in the winter, predominantly Scotland, I think. The tree, that's the tree, not the snow. The tree is based on a Japanese maple tree, and of course they look absolutely stunning when they have their leaves in the spring and in the autumn when everything is red. But also in the winter when they just have these really beautiful curving branches, and they look absolutely gorgeous. So I thought, well, so we called one of the pieces Waxwing, as you can tell. We called one of the pieces The Ballad of the Maple Tree, because we knew we wanted to have the maple tree, and we wanted to relate obviously the titles to the wintry theme to the artwork and link them all together. We also have Luci d'inverno, which is obviously the title of the album. We have Faded Memories of a Winter Dream, which again, it's a winter-based CD, and obviously because I created this CD when I was at university, it's almost like the memories are there, you know, and they will fade over time, but they will still be there. Then there was another one called Ocean Rhapsody, which wasn't quite as wintry related, but we went with it. We have Zero, which is actually a flute technology piece. It's a piece that was created by Ben, and created using a load of effects produced purely by me on the flute. So I would do a scale, I would do lots of different types of articulation, I would do long notes, I would do short notes, I would do loud and soft, I would do key slaps, so I just press the keys down loudly, and do lots of different things. And he created an entire piece using technology to manipulate the sounds that I'd made into a piece of music. We wanted to use it as a background, so then we could write another flute part on top, but we never got round to it in the end. Maybe we'll do it one day. Then there is Frozen Time, which obviously frozen, ice, snow, winter, logical. Then obviously Waxwing. Then we have Constant Snows, Drifting, Timeless, and that is almost a minimalistic feel. So the Constant Snows, Drifting, Timeless is a sort of play on the piece itself. So the Constant Snows part is the flute has a constant rhythmic pattern that goes on through the whole of the first 2/3 of the piece before it completely changes. And it moves from one part to another part to another part, but it stays constant. Then the Drifting Timeless is the fact that the piece is in one time signature, but it feels like it's in another. So Drifting Timeless, because it kind of almost feels like it doesn't have a time signature, it doesn't have a steady beat. It's a bit like, oh, is it in 3? Is it in 4? Oh, I'm not quite sure. So that's the Drifting Timeless bit. And then the final piece is Winter Stars, and that's another piece by Ben, and is obviously there to sort of replicate the sort of twinkling night sky effect that you get on a clear, crisp winter's night, maybe when there's the moon and the stars and it's snowing and it's really bright. The sky's really dark and everything else is really bright. So there are actually on my YouTube channel, if you're watching on YouTube, great. If you're watching on Twitch, if you head over to the YouTube channel, you can just type in Chris Docherty flute and it will come up. There are a couple of snippets from the CD. There are also a few on my website, I think. So that's that. So if you would like me to do another composition basics video, I will, another stream, because we're going to be stuck on lockdown for the foreseeable future, I think. So it would be really good to see you all again, and to maybe have a little bit more of a friendly chat, guys. Use the chat, it's there. I'm happy to answer any questions you put to me, so please do think of some questions and pop them my way. So yeah, I would very much like to see as many of you as I can in the future, with some more streams, because we're obviously gonna be stuck indoors, isolated for a while yet. And in that next stream, I would like to maybe showcase some of my pieces. If you'd like to hear them, that would be really cool. And I can sort of maybe go through my process whilst, I mean, it was a few years ago now, so I don't know whether I remember the process 100%. The process probably didn't exist back then. It was probably just a mad dash to get notes on a page and get music written. So it would be really cool to see you guys again in a few days' time, maybe this time next week, or in fact not this time next week because I'll be doing a different stream. But please do hop in to any of the streams. They will be at the moment, every Wednesday and every Saturday. I may up that. I'm still creating YouTube content. I'm still active on social media. So drop me a message or pop something in the chat in a minute. That'd be good. Pop something in the chat. And I will see you all soon. I'm just going to leave the stream running. I'm gonna sit here and chill for a bit, in the hope that you guys would like to maybe ask me some questions. So please do ask me anything about my musical journey, about my compositional method, about my favorite composers, my favorite pieces, my CD. Ask me how I got into composition, whether I'm still composing, like whatever you want. Just ask me, and I will sit here for a few minutes. In the hope that I might just twiddle thumbs to make people really awkward. That's it. I won't do that. Don't worry. This is when the people in the stream leave because I'm not saying anything. So yeah, I will pop another quick message in the chat. I'm loath to stop the stream early just in case people hop by, so I will leave it open for another couple of minutes. Yeah, if you have any questions for me, if there's anything you would like to know about my compositions, my compositional experience, if you'd like me to write anything for you, that would be cool. I'm happy to do that. No commission necessary. I will write something and send you a file or something. And yeah, if you want to find me on social media, I'm at Chris Docherty _music on Instagram. I'm sure you'll be able to find me, or hashtag all things bright and flutiful, because that's not cheesy at all. I'm Chris Docherty.musician on Facebook. If you know me, you probably like the page anyway. My website is www.chrisdocherty-flutist.com. So if you have any pressing matters and you want to drop me an email, or you just want to know about the schedule of live streams over the next few weeks, that will be on there. I'm also on Twitter as well, at Chris Flutist. Tweet me if you like. My YouTube videos will be going up as normal, so please do hop along onto the YouTube channel, and yeah, I'll love to see you on any of the social media channels. And as now we're about to close the stream, I just want to wish everyone a happy and healthy isolation period. I know it sounds very odd, but please do look after yourself. Listen to all the advice that's being given, because we've had a lot of people contracting this virus. A lot of people have died, and I think it would just be stupid for us to ignore the advice that's being given by the government, that's being given by the NHS and by doctors and nurses. So please do stay in. Don't go out unless absolutely necessary or for your daily constitutional, because at the end of the day, we can save lives if we simply sit on our bum and do nothing. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I'm just sat on my bum doing a live stream, talking to you guys, which is probably the easiest hour of my life. I've just talked at the screen for an hour. So, yeah, keep yourself safe. Keep in touch. Find me on any of my social media channels. Follow me, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I look forward to seeing you in the next stream. So stay safe, and I will see you next time. Cheers, guys.